Hello everyone, welcome back. So in the previous video, we had left our login page in this state where we had all of the logic related to our form completed. We had also implemented some logic for our login button. So when it was pressed, we would check to see if the form was validated. And we were also saving the values that we got from the email and password text field into the corresponding email and password variables. So with that, I think now we're ready to actually implement our auth provider into our login page and actually start getting data and actually start using our auth provider. Okay, so let's get going. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to import the auth or the provider package. Once we have the provider package imported, the next thing we're going to do is that I'm going to remove these two print statements for email and password. Just do command save. And then I'm going to go to our main build function, and then we're going to see where the scaffold is, and then where our login page UI is being, the function for that is being called. I'm going to copy this, and instead of this, I'm going to use a new widget, which is known as a change notifier provider widget, and we're going to use the .value constructor for it. And then I'm going to also define the type for our change notifier provider. So the type is going to be of type auth provider. So we'll have a change notifier provider whose type is going to be the custom auth provider class that we created. And since it inherits from change notifier, we can actually use that class for this change notifier provider. Then we're going to use the value constructor, and then I'm going to pass in the value. For now, I'll just leave it a null, and then we're going to define the child, and the child is going to be our login page UI. So once we have that, I'm just going to do Alt-Shift-F and to reformat the code, and then we can now change the value. So the value that now it's going to be is going to be the auth provider. And what value are we going to use? Well, the value we're going to use is going to be the instance that we created when the auth provider class, or the static instance for the auth provider class. So all we have to do is go to the top and import our auth provider class, then go to the bottom where we actually define the value for our change notifier provider. And here I'm just going to do auth provider dot instance, and then do command save. So nothing is going to change, but the change notifier provider now has the value of our auth provider. So now what we're going to do is that we are going to wrap the main container of our login page UI inside of a new builder widget. And why we're using the builder widget? Because the builder widget gives us access to a build context, because it has a builder function. So now this builder function will get a context passed to it, which will be of type build context, and I'll name it _context. Context. And this is really important for us, this context, and I'll explain that in a bit. So now we're going to return all of the stuff that we were returning previously for this function. So essentially we wrapped our container inside of a builder function, and then I'm going to do command save. Now that we have the context, now what we can do is actually access the auth provider. And the way we're going to access the auth provider is that we are going to, first of all, go and define a new variable. So I'm going to call it auth, and I'm just going to call this var auth. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to set it equal to provider dot auth, and then it's going to be of type auth provider. So we're going to find a provider whose type is going to auth provider using a context, and the context is going to be the context that gets passed into us by the build context. Once that is done, we can do command save. Okay, so now what's going to happen is that the change notifier provider has a value of auth provider.instance. Every time something inside of here, the auth provider changes, or we call it notify listeners, it's going to re-render all of the widgets under its child. So it's going to re-render everything under the login page UI. And every time the builder function is going to be called, it'll go and call this line of code, which is provider.auth of type auth provider context, and it's going to get the build context. It's going to see, oh, we need a provider of type auth provider, and it's going to go up the build tree and find the first place where it can find our auth provider.instance. So in this case, the builder would then, once the provider.auth provider is called, what it's going to do is that it's going to go up the build tree or a more graphical representation of this would be if I bring in the .dev tools. So let's just assume that this column has our actual code for our provider.auth auth provider context. And then this container is the one that actually has the value for auth provider.instance. So basically what it's going to do is that this call of auth provider.auth auth provider, it's going to go up and search amongst all these widgets to see which widget can give it the auth provider. And since the container has the auth provider, it'll grab the value from there. And this way we'll have access to the actual auth provider instance that then we can use and access data. So now that we have the auth provider, what I would like to do is actually go to the top of my class, and then I'm going to define a new variable, which is going to be of type auth or auth provider, and I'm just going to call it _auth. And then instead of defining a local variable for our auth provider, I'm just going to do auth is equal to our provider of context. So if I do command save now, and to prove now that we have access to the data, what we can do is we can just print _auth dot and then user. And for now it's going to print nothing, and the reason for that, or we are just going to get null, is because we don't have a user actually logged in. But hopefully it should print something showing us that we actually have access to the auth provider. Okay, so now that we have the auth provider actually implemented into our login page, I'm going to end this video here, and now in the next video I am going to show you how we can use our auth provider to now actually log in the user and then also update the UI accordingly. So with that, I'm going to end this video here, and I'm going to see you guys in the next one.